Hi everybody! Today we're going to be making a clay artifact that goes with our historical figure that we have been studying. Today you will need a piece of clay about the size of a baseball, and then you can also use some other tools from around your house. If you have Play-Doh tools, a plastic knife, your scratch tool, or even a pencil, a rolling pin, or even a water bottle or a can that could help you to flatten out or make different shapes with your clay. The first step is to decide what artifact you would like to make and what shape it is in. So maybe you want to make a trophy or a medal, an Olympic medal or a Nobel Peace Prize, something that your historical figure has earned. Think about things that your historical figure likes or might have. Maybe they have a special pet or studied animals. You can also make your clay into a flat piece of rectangle, circle, or any shape that you want, and then you can paint a picture of your historical figure, where they live, or a symbol of them, and you can use the paint to add that next week. Maybe you want to make yours into the shape of a heart if your historical figure had a big heart or was kind, or another shape that is symbolic of your person. Step 2 is to take your clay and work it out. You want it to be into a round shape. When you're working it out, you're going to want to squeeze the clay, you're going to want to roll the clay, you're really going to want to warm it up and make it softer and easier to work with. You're going to want to work out the clay for a few minutes with warm hands. You could put it by a heater or even add a tiny bit of warm water to your hands if it's just not warming up. This is going to really work out the bubbles in the clay and make it softer and easier to work with as you form your clay. You can hit the clay, you can squeeze the clay, you can roll the clay, you could even toss the clay. Really do anything to just get it warmed up and feeling smoother and having less cracks in it. This part is fun to do. So once your clay feels as though it has been worked out, it will be smoother, it will have less cracks in it, and then you will know that you're ready to make the shape that you want to make it into. So here is a picture of what my clay looked like, and notice I did keep it in the shape of a sphere. Step 3, decide what shape you want to form it into. So if you want to make it something that's sort of flat, you can take your two hands and press down on the sphere to make it flat, like a fat pancake. You could also use a tool like a rolling pin or a can to roll it out, or you could just use your hands. Now for this step, if you're looking to make something flat, you don't want it to be too thin. Otherwise it will become very fragile or breakable once it's dry. So you want it to be like a thick pancake, and you know that that's a good thickness to work with. You could leave it in the shape if you wanted something round, or step 4, you could cut it into the shape that you want it to be. So I just used a plastic butter knife to cut it into the shape of a rectangle because I wanted mine to look like a flag. You could also use a cookie cutter to cut it in the shape that you want, or even a cup or a bowl if you want it something round. If you're not quite sure what you want to make yet, I would suggest making it either a rectangle or a big circle like a plate, or even a bowl shape. And then next week you can paint it to be symbolic of your person and things that they like. And you can add those details next week. Any extra clay that you have left over, you can just set it to the side and you can make something else out of it. So I had some extra clay and I rolled it. I kind of rolled it between my hands and then I rolled it on the table to make it like a long snake. This is a long cylinder shape. I'm going to make this into my flag pole. So then you can cut it to be whatever size you want it to be, or you could even bend it to be in a different shape. So I'm going to cut mine a little bit shorter here so that my flagpole isn't too long and fragile. Any parts that you make, you do want to make sure that they're not too small, or they could easily break once it's dry. Now, this next step is very important if you want to attach two pieces of clay together. You can't just press them together and they won't stick once it's dry. So I'm doing the cross-hatching method, and I'm just using my plastic butter knife, but you could also use a scratch art tool, a pencil, or even your fingernails to make the crosshatch design in it. Notice that I'm making the cross-hatching in both parts of the clay that I want to stick together, and the cross-hatching is just etching in the shape of a tic-tac-toe pattern where you put lines going one way and lines going the other way. So I'm just making that pattern there with my fingernails. Then once I have the cross-hatching on both parts of my clay, I can then press them together. That makes the clay sort of like Velcro so that it will really stick together once it's dry. You really do want to take your hands and form it into all one piece. That way it won't fall apart after it's dry. Once you have the shape of the clay that you want it to be, put it onto a plate or a Tupperware or even a lid to let it sit so that it can dry over the next week. You can also add any more details that you want by scraping a pencil, a toothpick, or even using your fingernails or a scratch art tool to make some designs in it. So I was making the American flag and I decided to scratch in some of the lines to help me paint on the stripes, and then the square with some dots in it to add in some details, like the stars, or other designs that you want onto your clay. Did you know that clay comes from inside the earth? If you actually dig down deep enough, you would find clay in a layer underneath the soil. As it dries out, it may start to get some cracks in it, so I just use my fingers to rub it along the edges of any cracks. You can even add a tiny bit of water if some of your cracks won't go away. Here's another shape you can make with your clay. It's called a pinch pot. You push your thumb in the center to make a hole like a donut, and then you start squeezing it and turning it and squeezing it and turning it with your thumbs on the inside and your fingers on the outside. As you turn the pot and squeeze it, it makes it into the shape of a bowl, and you can use your hands to form it into as deep or as wide of a bowl as you want it to be. If at any point you don't like your clay project and you must start over again, you can. Just go back to step 1, form it back into a circle or a sphere, and then work out the clay again for a few minutes to make it soft. And then try something else, and you can make a different form out of it. So here's how my pinch pot looked when I was finished with it. I decided to take my pinch pot and flip it upside down and make it into the shell of a turtle. I thought it would be fun to try an animal this time, so I made that shape of the turtle shell, and then I used my extra clay to turn it into the head and the forelegs and the tail. If you have any extra clay left over from your project, feel free to use it and be creative and try a few things with it. So now I'm using the cross hatching method to make the different lines going in 2 different directions onto the clay where I'm going to attach on the legs. And I make the cross hatch motion on both the shell, and then I also do it on the legs where I'm going to attach them on. Even after all this work, the legs really don't stick on too well. So if you're sticking 2 pieces together, just be prepared to use a little bit of glue if it doesn't quite stick in the end, which is what I ended up doing after it was dry. You have to let it dry for an entire week before adding any glue or paint onto it. You do want it to be quite dry, although you could do it when it's wet, but it doesn't show up as bright. Finally, I take my finished sea turtle and I flip it onto a paper plate, and then I put it into a place in my house that is very safe on a bookshelf for it to dry for an entire week until next week's art class. I hope that you had fun today being creative and choosing something symbolic of the person that you have been studying in history. And I hope that you had fun trying a few different things out of your clay, and come next week with an idea of how you want to paint your clay artifact.